$1.5 trillion. A 170-kilometer glass wall slapped right in the middle of a scorching desert. And 9 million people packed inside. Back in 2021, the Crown Prince promised the world the impossible. By 2030, they'd build a marvel that would put the pyramids of Giza to shame. But years went by. The dust from those slick 3D presentations finally settled, exposing a pretty brutal reality. While investors have been staring at the exact same renders for years, real engineers are out there stress-eating antacids, quietly admitting that a project this massive is going to take 50 years. In fact, according to major business outlets, the real plans for 2030 have already shifted away from the full 170-kilometer sweep. Now they're aiming for a tiny starter slice, planning to finish just 2.5 kilometers. Wait, are you serious? That is literally less than 2%. Hey everyone, welcome back to How Cities Function. The city's length is 170 kilometers and the width is just 200 meters. Do the math and we get a total footprint of exactly 34 square kilometers. And they want to cram 9 million people in there. Divide one by the other and you get a population density of 264,000 people per square kilometer. To put that insanity into perspective, that is 6 times denser than Manila, the most densely populated city on Earth today. I mean, the project itself initially blew everyone's minds. How many days could you survive in a glass box this tight? Sound off in the comments. A solid mirror skyscraper 500 meters high, that is way taller than the Empire State Building. Inside, they promised an autonomous green utopia with 0 cars and 0 traffic. But when you actually try to stuff a population the size of London into a blind, super tight glass box, math starts throwing some hilariously brutal curveballs. Let's kick things off with logistics. The scale here is so massive you couldn't just casually truck materials in. So, the first thing they did was take an existing port on the Red Sea, expand it, and completely overhaul it, turning it into the ultimate logistics hub for the entire mega build. And to house the workers, they set up a massive construction village designed for about 30,000 people right now, with plans to potentially expand it to hundreds of thousands. But while the engineers are busting their humps, the corporate spending is straight up comedy. According to major investigative reports, hundreds of millions of dollars a year were getting blown just on elite Western consultants, which became a massive scandal on its own. And get this, these consultants were pitching ideas that are completely unhinged. In early official plans, they were dead serious about glow-in-the-dark sand for the beaches, a giant artificial moon made of drones, and animatronic dinosaurs for entertainment. Because apparently, when you have a budget the size of a European country, a robotic T-Rex in the desert is the absolute first thing you desperately need. But right here is where we hit the greatest geological irony of the whole project. The two sides of the facade need 170 million square meters of glass, and underneath it all, millions of tons of concrete. You'd figure, hey, you're building in a desert, you've got an endless ocean of sand right under your boots. Just scoop it up, melt the glass, and mix the concrete. But Mother Nature hit them with a brutal reality check. First, the concrete. Desert sand has been whipped by the wind for centuries. The grains are perfectly round and smooth, like microscopic beads. They literally do not bind together. If you pour a foundation for a 500-meter skyscraper using that sand, it'll crumple like a cheap tent. So, to get the right jagged river sand for the concrete, Saudi Arabia has to import it on massive barges all the way from Australia and other countries. Second, the glass. You can't just melt a random sand dune and get a flawless mirror. Local sand is packed with way too much iron. The glass you'd get would be cloudy, brittle, and a gross dirty green color. So where are they getting 170 million square meters of pristine glass? They're buying it up all over the globe. Just soak in this level of logistical absurdity. To build a glass megacity in the middle of a giant desert, they have to buy both the right sand and the glass from completely different continents. From day one, the creators hyped up the line as the absolute peak of eco-friendly planning. But let's be real for a second. 170 kilometers of a continuous underground foundation is going to literally sever the natural flow of groundwater. It's like slapping a concrete dam straight across the desert, cutting off animal migration routes, and then bragging, "Look at our carbon-neutral eco-city." And now for a fact that'll have flat earthers grabbing a paper bag to breathe into. The curvature of the Earth. Over a stretch this long, you simply cannot ignore the planet's curve. The project's geometry stops being some abstract blueprint and becomes a literal engineering nightmare. On paper, a line seems perfectly straight. On a real, spherical planet, not so much. If engineers poured a perfectly flat, straight foundation for the whole 170 kilometers, the center of the building would hit the dirt and the edges would literally launch into the sky. You gotta admit, it's pretty hilarious. Your architectural project has clearly gone off the rails when the actual shape of the planet becomes your biggest headache. So, what are these 9 million people actually gonna do inside? Where are they working? The official pitch: NEOM is the hub of the future. No factories, no manufacturing, no blue-collar grime. The city wants scientists, AI gurus, geneticists, and executives. All the heavy lifting is supposed to be done by robots. So basically, we're getting a super dense megacity populated entirely by tech bros, startup founders, and influencers. Can you imagine how insanely awkward and insufferable the morning elevator small talk is gonna be? And that brings us to the most painful question of all. Exactly how much is living in this glass utopia gonna cost? There are no official Zillow listings for these apartments yet, but let's bring that calculator back out. The project's budget is hovering around $1.5 trillion, and you better believe investors want their cash back. Real estate experts globally are already calling it, "Forget about affordable housing for regular folks." The line is destined to be an exclusive gated community for millionaires and high-rolling expats. A tiny concrete studio on the -20th floor facing a blank wall will probably set you back a couple $1,000,000. And if you want a penthouse with natural sunlight overlooking the artificial jungle, well, you won't just need to break the piggy bank. You'll basically need to strike oil in your own backyard. But hey, hitting the like button costs absolutely nothing. Subscribe and ring the bell if you want to keep seeing how cities actually function instead of how they look in a PR brochure. Which begs a very logical question. How are all these millionaires going to commute to the office or drop their kids off at daycare or school along one single line? The creator's official answer is wild and honestly a little creepy. You won't be commuting anywhere. The architects cooked up this concept called zero-gravity urbanism. They promise that absolutely all your daily needs, your condo, your office, that high-end clinic, the daycare, and the boutique, will all be stacked in one vertical block. Officially, everything you need to survive is within a 5-minute walk or a quick elevator ride. So your entire existence is trapped inside a perfect 5-minute glass bubble. Sounds awesome. Right up until you decide to switch jobs. Or until your kid gets transferred to a school that's 70 kilometers down the hall. And what about basic survival? 9 million people gotta eat. This is where the creators drop a concept straight out of cyberpunk. The plan is that a huge chunk of your food will be grown right inside this ecosystem, using massive vertical farms and automated food tech delivery models. People on the internet are already joking that surviving in this city is just going to be a paid subscription fee for your meals. Keep that sarcastic dinner subscription joke in the back of your mind. We're circling back to it. Now, for those rare trips to see friends across town, all the logistics are buried underground in what they call the spine. It has 3 whole levels. The top is for pedestrians. The middle is a service layer, just swarming with cargo drones and delivery bots. And down at the very bottom is the high-speed rail. But they totally ignored the mother of all traffic jams, the vertical one. Before you even catch that train, you gotta get down from floor 100. Even if just 1 million people rush the elevators during the morning commute, they'll need an elevator system with such ridiculous capacity that New York City rush hour will look like a joke. And if a power surge knocks out those elevators for even an hour, lace up your sneakers for some brutal morning cardio down 150 flights of stairs. The official site claims this train will rocket you from end to end in just 20 minutes. To cover 170 kilometers in that time frame with stops, the train has to push over 500 kilometers per hour. But with a straight line setup like this, any major glitch in the transport backbone basically paralyzes a massive chunk of the city. If some guy accidentally drops his iced caramel macchiato on the platform and jams the train doors, hundreds of thousands of people are going to be texting their boss, "Sorry, I'm stuck inside a 170-kilometer tube." And that brings up another very obvious question. How do you even get into this giant glass box? And more importantly, how do you get out for vacation? Well, Saudi Arabia is building a massive international airport just for that. The promo materials pitch the project as a super accessible global hub, bragging that a huge chunk of the world is just a few hours flight away. But let's just appreciate the pure irony here. They are pitching us a 100% carbon-neutral, zero-emission eco-city, where the front door is a massive international aviation hub burning thousands of tons of jet fuel every single day. Imagine the summer holidays, when even 10% of those 9 million residents decide they want to see a real beach outside their glass greenhouse. They all have to funnel down into one single underground transport corridor. The bottleneck at the airport train station will be so insane, people will literally grow old in line. Speaking of smart systems, we are promised a city completely run by AI. A normal smart city collects maybe 10% of data on its citizens. But in the line, they're aiming to collect up to 90% of data. Elevators, trains, temperature sensors, facial recognition cameras tracking your every move. This glass box will know exactly what time you woke up, who you bumped into in the hall, and how many times you used the restroom. Forget to flush, and your smart home might just automatically charge your credit card. And this is exactly where critics start asking some genuinely dystopian questions. Where does convenience end and total digital control begin? When a city tracks literally every step you take, the word privacy starts sounding like a myth. The internet is already making dark jokes. How do the cops even pull you over in a city with no cars? Why chase you down with sirens when the smart home can just digitally lock your front door, shut off your water, and cancel that food tech meal subscription? You'll just sit on your couch starving until a police drone buzzes straight through your window. What about emergencies? The biggest issue here isn't even about flashy tech. It's about basic evacuation. How fast can you actually clear tens of thousands of people out of a vertical sector if a fire knocks out the elevators and transit hubs? Evacuating vertically downward on foot from 500 meters up is an engineering nightmare humanity just hasn't found a safe fix for yet. Where do you chill on the weekend? Where do the kids play? In a normal city, you hit up Central Park. In the line, the parks aren't on the ground, they hang in midair. The architects plan to suspend entire gardens, walkways, and movie theaters right between the two walls of the skyscraper at various levels. Want to take a walk in the woods? Cool. Hop in the elevator to floor 85, where a chunk of fake jungle is wedged between the glass. But soil is insanely heavy. To grow a legit forest on the 100th floor, the building's frame has to support the crushing weight of hundreds of thousands of tons of wet dirt and trees. Plus, direct sunlight barely makes it down into that canyon. They'll have to rig up thousands of giant heliostat mirrors on the roof just to bounce the sun down to keep the plants alive. They even designed a massive sports stadium floating 300 meters up in the air. You're cheering for your team, and right beneath your seat is a drop the size of the Eiffel Tower. Structurally, this is an unprecedented nightmare, designing a rig that can absorb the shockwaves from tens of thousands of fans jumping up and down. Because if your bleachers snap at 300 meters, that's going to be the most epic, but definitely the shortest game of your life. And if you get claustrophobic in the glass box, NEOM is building a playground right next door. It's called Trojena, a full-blown ski resort with outdoor ski runs right in the middle of the Arabian desert. Apparently, air conditioning a glass megacity wasn't enough of a flex, so they decided to deep freeze a chunk of the desert for snowboarders too. Now, let's talk about air and ventilation. Welcome to a thermodynamic disaster. How do you breathe at the bottom of a 500-meter canyon trapped between glass? The official brochures swear by a perfect year-round microclimate and natural ventilation. The pitch is that the shape of the building itself will magically channel a light breeze and shade. Sounds like Harry Potter magic. But let's be logical for a second. You are building a colossal glass greenhouse in a wasteland where summer heat easily blasts past 50 degrees Celsius. No natural breeze is going to sink half a kilometer down through hanging gardens and dense urban grids. If they don't install insanely powerful forced ventilation, the lower levels are going to turn into a suffocating sauna of CO2, humidity, and the lingering cooking smells of 9 million people. Engineers will have to pack the entire 170-kilometer structure with a massive grid of industrial turbines and AC units. And here's a brutal law of physics. To cool the air inside, you have to dump the hot air outside. Hundreds of thousands of AC units will be blasting heat out of the city and straight into the desert 24/7. Climatologists estimate that the facade of the line will basically act like a giant glowing radiator, superheating an already dead wasteland. And where is the juice coming from for all these turbines and elevators? The official PR, 100% renewable energy. The Saudis are actually building the world's largest green hydrogen plant right now, dropping over $8 billion on it. But there's a phenomenal spatial paradox hiding here. To feed this energy-guzzling monster, they will have to cover an area the size of Belgium with wind turbines and solar panels. The entire desert surrounding this compact eco-city will be absolutely blanketed in millions of panels. And that brings us right back to our favorite enemy, sandstorms. When the sky gets choked with dust for 3 days straight, solar panels produce absolutely zero power. And if a blackout hits a smart glass city with no openable windows, that giant greenhouse loses its AC and turns into a roasting oven in a matter of hours. One last delicate topic. Where do 9 million people go to the bathroom? Try to imagine a main sewer pipe 170 kilometers long. The pressure at the end of that thing would be so intense you could cut diamonds with it. But the official blueprint sounds super sci-fi. They promise a closed-loop system and 100% recycling right inside each district. No dumping into the ocean. Waste will drop into massive underground bioreactors. The solid stuff gets turned into biogas for electricity, and the wastewater gets blasted through heavy-duty purification filters. Then, industrial pumps shoot that clean gray water hundreds of meters back up to water those hanging gardens. A flawless eco-loop. Though, if the main transfer pump on sublevel 5 ever breaks down, this whole utopia instantly turns into an ecological disaster with major cyberpunk vibes. What about drinking water? The original plan called for a massive, eco-friendly desalination plant worth $1.5 billion. But reality slammed the brakes again. Due to major project revisions, those giant contracts for new plants actually ended up getting canceled. While the PR teams are busy drawing waterfalls inside the lobbies, the actual engineers are pulling their hair out trying to figure out how to hydrate millions of people without fantasy budgets and without killing the Red Sea with millions of tons of toxic salt brine. On top of that, Saudi Arabia is already heavily investing in cloud seeding tech, so the idea of artificially controlling the rain isn't just sci-fi anymore. But how you actually apply that to a giant glass wall remains an open question. I guess they plan to just summon rain on a schedule to keep the 80-floor gardens alive. And finally, let's look at the facade. If you want a 170-kilometer mirror to look like a shining beacon of the future and not a dirty truck windshield, you are going to need a literal army of window washing drones. Just imagine the annual budget for Windex alone. Honestly, window washer might be the most secure non-tech gig in NEOM for the next 1,000 years. Look, any normal city survives because it acts like a spider web. It's messy, flexible, and interconnected. The line is a tightly pulled string, perfectly straight, wildly high-tech, but requiring insane amounts of cash just to keep it from snapping on a daily basis. Even if they only ever finish those measly 2.5 kilometers, it will still go down as an absolute engineering triumph. But that triumph is bought with a daily, grueling war against gravity, thermodynamics, and logistics. And as we all know, good old physics has an undefeated 100% win record. Thank you guys so much for watching to the end. Make sure to hit subscribe. Catch you in the next one.